The morning had started like any other in the busy city. The streets were alive with people rushing to work, students hurrying to school, and the distant hum of traffic blending into a constant background noise. In the heart of the city stood a large, well-known retail store, the kind where people often went for both essentials and small luxuries. Its tall glass doors reflected the bright sunlight, giving the building a polished and almost untouchable appearance. To most, it was just another store. But for one woman, it was a place that she personally owned, though no one there had any idea of her identity. That morning, the store was buzzing with activity. Employees moved briskly between aisles, stocking shelves, arranging products, and greeting customers with the practiced cheer of trained professionals. Among them was the store manager, a man who prided himself on control and authority. He had been promoted quickly over the years, but his confidence often teetered on arrogance. To him, rules were absolute, and anyone who appeared to challenge his authority, even unknowingly, was a problem to be corrected immediately. The woman entered the store quietly. She was dressed simply, wearing comfortable clothes that allowed her to move freely. Her hair was pulled back neatly, and she carried herself with a calm confidence that came not from being noticed, but from knowing her own worth. She had come not for shopping, but to see how her store was operating, as she often did. She liked to observe the daily workings, to see firsthand how employees treated customers, and to catch any small issues before they became bigger problems. She preferred to do this quietly, blending in so she could truly see the store without anyone acting differently around her. For a while, everything seemed normal. She moved through the aisles slowly, examining the products and watching the staff interact with customers. A few employees smiled politely as she passed, though none paid her any special attention. That was exactly how she wanted it. She wanted the store to feel natural, just like any other day, so she could see the real environment her customers experienced. But soon, something changed. Near the electronics section, a small disagreement broke out. The woman had asked a staff member a simple question about a product, and the employee, feeling flustered, had given a vague answer. The manager, who had been nearby, overheard the exchange. In his mind, it wasn't just a minor misunderstanding, it was a sign of disrespect, both from the staff member for not knowing the answer and, more importantly, from the customer for daring to question the employee. He stepped forward quickly, his face tense and red with frustration. He had a short temper, and today, for reasons he couldn't fully explain, that temper was ready to explode. "Excuse me," he called out, his voice sharp and cutting through the ambient noise of the store. The woman turned to face him, her expression calm, her eyes steady. He walked up to her and, without fully thinking, confronted her aggressively. "You can't just question my staff like that," he said, his tone full of authority, as if he owned not just the store, but the world around him. He gestured wildly, pointing at the shelves, at the staff, at her. The woman didn't respond angrily. She didn't shout or argue. She simply looked at him with a quiet firmness, the kind of look that told him she was not intimidated but also not seeking confrontation. But the manager was beyond reason in that moment. In front of other customers and employees, he lost control entirely. Without warning, he raised his hand and slapped her across the face. The sound echoed slightly in the store, a sharp, startling noise that seemed to freeze everyone in place. Customers gasped. Employees froze, unsure of how to react. Some reached for their phones instinctively, while others simply watched, horrified. The woman's head tilted slightly from the impact, but she didn't scream or strike back. Her composure remained intact, though her heart pounded fiercely and her mind raced. She could feel a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief, but she didn't let any of it show outwardly. She had seen plenty of moments like this in the business world, but this one was different. This time, she was not just any customer. She was the owner, though the manager had no idea. She took a steadying breath, trying to calm the rush of emotions. The noise around her was chaotic. People were whispering, pointing, some murmuring apologies, others just staring in shock. A young employee timidly approached, unsure whether to intervene. The manager, still red-faced, looked at her as if expecting some kind of response, some acknowledgement that he had corrected a problem. But she didn't give him the reaction he wanted. She remained calm, silent, almost serene. Her silence was more powerful than any words could have been. It unsettled him further, though he didn't realize why. The customers in the store were confused, some concerned, some angry, some unsure what had happened. Whispers spread quickly. Did he really just hit her? Why would he do that? Someone call security. The manager, feeling the attention and unsure how to regain control, muttered something about the customer being difficult, about needing to maintain order. But his words were lost in the growing tension of the store. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the one commanding the room. He was the center of attention, but not in the way he was used to. He was exposed, vulnerable, and most importantly, unaware of exactly who he had just confronted. Meanwhile, the woman composed herself and decided on the best course of action. She could have called security, demanded the police, or even retaliated verbally, but she didn't. She knew that reactions fueled conflict. Instead, she quietly walked to the nearest staff member, asking politely to speak with someone from management, someone who would be able to address serious employee misconduct. That someone, of course, would turn out to be her in her official capacity. But for now, she remained calm and collected. She wanted to handle the situation with strategy, not emotion. As she moved away, some customers followed, curious and concerned. The employees exchanged nervous glances, unsure if they should intervene or stay out of the escalating tension. The manager, feeling slightly triumphant that he had asserted control, didn't realize the gravity of what he had done. His behavior was reckless, impulsive, and deeply unprofessional, but at the moment he believed he had the upper hand. He didn't see the calm authority in the woman's steps, the quiet confidence that would soon turn this incident upside down. The scene in the store that morning was chaotic, but it was also revealing. It revealed not only the manager's flaws, his arrogance, quick temper, and lack of self-control, but also the woman's remarkable composure and strength. She had been struck, humiliated in front of strangers, yet she remained in control of herself. She didn't let the situation define her. Instead, she began to think about the next steps, planning carefully. She was determined not only to address the incident, but to ensure that such behavior would never happen again, not just to her, but to any customer or employee in her stores. As she left the store that day, she reflected on the absurdity of the situation. A man had struck her, not knowing he was hitting the very person who owned the business. She imagined the surprise on his face if he ever found out, but more importantly, she thought about how she could turn this moment into a lesson. Not revenge, not anger, but a moment of transformation for the store, the staff, and even the manager himself. She understood that power wasn't just about wealth. It was about how you handled challenges, how you held yourself, and how you taught others to act with respect and integrity. The morning ended with a sense of tension and anticipation. The store returned to its normal rhythm, but the memory of the incident lingered. Employees whispered among themselves, trying to make sense of what had happened. Customers, some still in the store, speculated about the identities involved. And the manager? He returned to his office thinking he had won the confrontation, completely unaware that the real reckoning had only just begun. The woman, meanwhile, left quietly, her mind already working on the next steps. She knew that confronting the manager in the right way would not only address the immediate incident, but also set a precedent for the entire company. She would not allow disrespect, arrogance, or violence to overshadow the values she had built her business on. And though the manager didn't know it, his actions that day had just set the stage for a lesson in humility, respect, and the true power of leadership. By the time she stepped out onto the bustling streets again, the city continued its normal rhythm, completely unaware of the drama that had just unfolded inside the store. Yet for her, this was not just another day. This was a moment that would define how she led, how she demanded respect, and how she ensured that her stores reflected the values she held dear. The first part of the story had ended, but the real story, the story of accountability, revelation, and justice, was only beginning. After leaving the store that morning, the woman walked through the crowded streets, her mind racing. She felt a mix of emotions, shock, anger, disbelief, but most of all, she felt a quiet determination. She had been humiliated, yes, but she also knew that how she reacted would define what happened next. This wasn't just about one man's arrogance. It was about setting an example, protecting her employees, and showing that no one had the right to behave violently, no matter who walked into her store. She stepped into a small, quiet cafe a few blocks away. The sounds of the city faded slightly, replaced by the gentle hum of conversation, the clinking of cups, and the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. She took a seat in a corner, pulled out her phone, and called her assistant. The assistant picked up immediately, sensing from her tone that something serious had happened. "I need the details of that store," she said calmly, though there was a steel in her voice that made the assistant pause. "Every employee roster, every manager's schedule, every camera feed from today. I want a full report." Her assistant quickly responded, "Of course. I'll gather everything and have it ready within the hour." As she hung up, the woman thought about the irony of the situation. The man who had struck her had no idea who she was. He had treated her like any ordinary customer. Not realizing that she owned the very company he worked for, she imagined his surprise if he ever discovered the truth. But she didn't want to humiliate him publicly in a way that would seem petty. Instead, she wanted to handle this with dignity and strategy. Her goal was not revenge, it was accountability. She sipped her coffee slowly, letting her mind wander through the events of the morning. She remembered the look on the manager's face when he had confronted her. He had been so certain of his power, so sure that he could control the situation, but he had underestimated her calmness, her ability to think clearly under pressure. That was her strength. While he had acted impulsively, she had observed, assessed, and planned. The woman reflected on why she often visited her stores in disguise. She liked to see how things really worked. She didn't want employees to act differently just because they knew she was the owner. She wanted honesty, integrity, and genuine behavior. Today, that approach had allowed her to see the true nature of the store's leadership, and the results were alarming. The manager's behavior was not just inappropriate, it was dangerous. By mid-morning, her assistant had compiled the initial report. The woman went through it carefully, reviewing employee statements and video footage from security cameras. The footage showed the confrontation clearly. The manager had approached her aggressively, and his actions had been entirely unprovoked. The staff had frozen, unsure how to respond. Customers had looked on in shock. It was a tense and chaotic scene. But one thing was undeniable. The manager had crossed a line that could not be ignored. She leaned back in her chair, thinking about the steps she needed to take. First, the manager would have to be confronted. Second, the staff and customers needed reassurance that such behavior was unacceptable. And third, she wanted to make sure that this incident would serve as a lesson for the entire company. Leadership was not just about wealth or position, it was about setting standards and living by them. Her mind wandered briefly to her own journey. She had built her company from the ground up, starting with nothing more than an idea and a determination to succeed. Along the way, she had faced countless obstacles, doubts from others, financial setbacks, and discrimination, but she had always persisted. Today's incident reminded her that even in a position of success, challenges could arise in unexpected ways. Yet she had always believed that strength came from how one responded to adversity, not from avoiding it. By noon, she decided it was time to act. She returned to her car and drove to the store, taking a quiet, deliberate path that allowed her to enter without drawing attention. Her plan was simple. She would confront the manager directly, calmly, and professionally, making it clear that his actions were unacceptable and would not be tolerated. She would not shout, threaten, or humiliate him. She would act with authority and composure, the authority that came from being the owner and the composure that came from knowing her own power. When she arrived at the store, she was met by a few employees who had recognized her from previous visits. They looked surprised to see her so soon, and a hint of nervousness appeared in their eyes. She gave them a small, reassuring smile. She didn't want them to be afraid. She wanted them to feel supported. She walked through the store slowly, allowing the manager to see her, and the look of confusion on his face was immediate. He had thought that by the next day, the incident would be forgotten or at least minimized. He had no idea that the person he had struck was not just any customer, but the owner herself. The realization hit him slowly like a cold wave, and his face paled. For the first time, he felt vulnerability, the kind he had never experienced in his career. She approached him quietly but firmly. "We need to talk," she said, her voice calm but unmistakably authoritative. The manager nodded, swallowing hard, and followed her to a private office in the back. The employees who had witnessed the confrontation watched silently, knowing that this was the moment everything would change. Once in the office, she didn't start with anger or accusations. She let the silence hang for a moment, giving the manager time to realize the gravity of the situation. Then she began. "Yesterday you struck a customer in this store," she said plainly. "Do you understand how serious that is?" The manager stammered, trying to explain himself. He spoke of stress, misunderstanding, and frustration, but his words sounded weak and ineffective. He had realized painfully that no excuse could justify what he had done. She listened carefully, then continued, "This is not just about one mistake. This is about respect, professionalism, and the values of this company. What you did was unacceptable. Violence has no place here. Threatening or harming anyone, customer or employee, is a violation of everything we stand for." Her words were calm but firm, cutting through any attempt at justification. She could see the fear in his eyes, the realization that his position and reputation were at risk. But she didn't seek to humiliate him publicly. Instead, she focused on accountability, on making it clear that actions have consequences. She then outlined the next steps. The manager would be suspended immediately while the company reviewed the incident. There would be sensitivity training, clear policies reinforced across all stores, and regular evaluations to ensure that respect and professionalism were maintained at every level. She wanted to make sure that no one in her company would ever repeat such behavior. The manager listened silently, realizing that he was in the presence of someone far more powerful than he had imagined. He had assumed control in the store yesterday, but today he understood that real power was not aggression or authority. It was composure, intelligence, and integrity. After their conversation, she returned to the store floor, walking calmly among employees and customers. Her presence was reassuring, a visible reminder that the company cared about people and would take action to protect them. Employees whispered among themselves, grateful to see the owner handling the situation with such grace and strength. Customers looked on, some recognizing her, most simply observing the quiet authority she carried. By the end of the day, the store had returned to normal, but the incident had left a lasting impression. The employees who had witnessed the confrontation felt a renewed sense of commitment to professionalism and respect. The manager, meanwhile, faced the consequences of his actions and began to reflect deeply on how he had conducted himself. The woman had turned a moment of personal humiliation into a powerful lesson for everyone involved. That evening, as she left the store, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had acted decisively, upheld her values, and ensured accountability without resorting to anger or revenge. The city continued its busy rhythm around her, oblivious to the drama that had unfolded inside the store. Yet she knew that today had made a difference, not just for herself, but for her employees, her customers, and the culture of her company. She drove home, thinking about the importance of leadership, the responsibility that came with power, and the way one moment could change the course of many lives. The incident had revealed weaknesses, but it had also revealed strength, her strength, the strength of those who worked for her, and the potential for growth that comes when people are held accountable in a fair and just way. And as she looked out at the city lights shimmering in the evening sky, she felt certain of one thing: the story was far from over. The manager's actions had set in motion a series of events that would transform the store, the employees, and even the man himself. Justice, accountability, and leadership were not just words on paper, they were actions, and she had already begun to turn them into reality. The next morning, the city woke to its usual rhythm: honking cars, hurried footsteps, and the chatter of people heading to work. But inside the store, things were different. The incident from yesterday hung in the air like a cloud. Employees exchanged nervous glances, some whispering quietly about what had happened. Customers seemed more alert, watching interactions closely. The atmosphere was tense, as if everyone knew that something important was about to happen. Though no one could say exactly what, the manager arrived early, already aware that the situation from yesterday had escalated. He had spent the night replaying the events in his mind, feeling a mix of guilt, fear, and confusion. For the first time, he understood that his actions might have consequences far beyond what he could control. He walked into the store trying to appear confident, but even his usual authoritative steps seemed uncertain. Meanwhile, the woman arrived quietly, just as she had the previous day, though this time with a clear purpose. She did not want a confrontation in front of customers or staff. She wanted to handle the matter with professionalism and authority. As she entered, a few employees recognized her immediately. Their eyes widened, some whispering to each other, some trying to hide their surprise. She offered them a calm, reassuring smile. She didn't want them to panic. She wanted them to feel that order and fairness would be restored. She walked past the front entrance, moving directly to the manager's office. The manager noticed her approach and froze. His heart raced. He had not expected to see her so soon, and certainly not with the quiet confidence that made it clear she was in charge. She knocked lightly on the door before entering, her composure unshaken. "Please have a seat," she said calmly, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. The manager complied, though his hands trembled slightly. He had spent the last 24 hours thinking of excuses, apologies, and explanations, but none seemed sufficient. He now realized that he was facing someone far more powerful and composed than he had ever imagined. She began without anger or shouting. Instead, her voice was steady, firm, and full of authority. "Yesterday, you struck a customer in this store. Do you understand the severity of that action?" The manager nodded quickly, words catching in his throat. He wanted to explain, to justify his behavior, but he couldn't find the right words. Nothing he could say would erase the fact that he had acted violently in front of customers and staff. "I want you to understand," she continued, "that this is not just about one mistake. This is about the culture of this company, about respect and about professionalism. What you did was completely unacceptable. Violence has no place here. Not towards customers, not towards employees, and certainly not in a company that values integrity and human dignity." The manager swallowed hard. He realized that no matter what he had intended, he had crossed a line that could never be ignored. His usual confidence, the kind that had carried him through years of managing stores, felt meaningless in this moment. He understood that the woman sitting across from him was not just a leader in title, but a leader in action, someone who embodied authority through composure and clear vision. She continued, laying out the consequences carefully and deliberately. "Effective immediately, you are suspended from your duties. During this time, there will be a review of your conduct as well as a company-wide reinforcement of policies regarding respect and professionalism. You will undergo training, and your future with this company will depend on your willingness to learn from this incident." The manager nodded silently, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He realized that he was not just facing punishment, but also the challenge of personal reflection. For the first time, he had to confront his own arrogance and recognize how his behavior had affected others. The woman's calm, firm approach left no room for excuses, only responsibility and accountability. After addressing the manager, she left the office and walked through the store floor, her presence commanding attention without a single harsh word. Employees looked at her with a mixture of relief and admiration. They saw someone who could confront wrongdoing directly, without fear or aggression. They saw a leader who valued fairness and integrity above all else. Customers noticed the calm authority she carried, the kind that made them feel reassured that the store was in capable hands. She stopped to speak with a few employees individually. She asked them how they were feeling, if they had been impacted by the incident, and if they had any concerns about the store environment. She listened carefully to their responses, showing genuine interest in their experiences. This was more than just damage control. It was an opportunity to rebuild trust, reinforce standards, and empower her employees to act with confidence and professionalism. Meanwhile, word of the incident had already begun to spread quietly through social media. Some customers who had witnessed the confrontation shared their experiences, creating a ripple of awareness. The story highlighted both the manager's misconduct and the woman's remarkable composure and leadership. While she did not seek publicity, she knew that the incident would inevitably become a talking point, and she wanted to ensure that the narrative reflected accountability and fairness, not sensationalism or revenge. Throughout the day, the manager remained in a quiet office space reflecting on the events. He reviewed security footage, reread employee statements, and thought about how differently he might have handled the situation. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on him. He realized that leadership was not about asserting authority through fear or aggression. It was about guiding, respecting, and inspiring others. The lesson was harsh, but it was real. By late afternoon, the woman had called a meeting with key staff members to discuss the incident in a constructive way. She emphasized the importance of respect, professionalism, and empathy. She reminded them that every customer and employee deserved to be treated with dignity, and that the company's reputation depended on these core values. She encouraged open dialogue, asking staff to share their thoughts and suggestions on how to maintain a safe, respectful environment. The meeting was honest, human, and impactful. Employees left feeling heard, supported, and motivated to uphold the standards she had set. As the day drew to a close, the atmosphere in the store had shifted. The tension that had hung over the morning was replaced by a sense of purpose and clarity. Employees walked with renewed confidence. Customers interacted with staff more positively, and even the suspended manager began to reflect deeply on his actions. The incident had not only been addressed but had become a catalyst for growth, learning, and accountability. Outside, the city continued its busy rhythm, unaware of the transformations that had taken place within the store's walls. Yet for the woman, the events of the day reinforced a key lesson. True leadership is tested not in moments of comfort, but in moments of conflict. How one handles adversity, how one responds to disrespect, and how one ensures fairness and accountability define the strength of a leader far more than wealth, title, or authority ever could. By the time she left the store that evening, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment. She had confronted wrongdoing directly, upheld her values, and ensured that everyone involved understood the importance of respect and professionalism. She had turned a moment of potential chaos into a lesson for her employees, a chance for the manager to reflect, and an opportunity to strengthen the culture of her company. As she walked back to her car, she thought about the long road ahead. There would be further actions, follow-ups, and perhaps challenges in ensuring that such behavior never occurred again. But she was confident. She had faced the problem head-on, with clarity, composure, and authority. The lessons learned that day would resonate throughout the company, shaping the actions of employees and management alike for years to come. And as she drove home, watching the city lights shimmer on wet asphalt, she felt certain of one truth. Real power is not in striking fear, commanding attention, or asserting control through aggression. Real power is in staying calm under pressure, taking responsibility, and turning adversity into a meaningful lesson that strengthens everyone involved. The incident with the manager was not just a challenge, it was an opportunity, and she had seized it with wisdom, courage, and integrity. The day after the confrontation, the store seemed calmer on the surface, but beneath that calm was a wave of change that had begun to ripple through the staff. Employees whispered to each other quietly in break rooms and hallways. They discussed the events, the woman's approach, and the manager's suspension. There was a sense of relief that the situation had been handled firmly, but also a sense of reflection. Everyone could feel that the store's culture was shifting, that accountability was no longer just an idea on paper, but a reality that touched every corner of the workplace. The woman arrived at the store early, before it officially opened. She walked through the aisle slowly, her steps deliberate. She stopped to greet employees, smiling warmly at those who had been particularly affected by the previous day's events. She wanted them to feel supported, to know that their experiences mattered and that the company was committed to their safety and dignity. Her presence was quiet but powerful. She didn't need to shout or demand attention. The respect and trust she had earned over the years spoke for itself. She held a brief meeting with the remaining management team. Her tone was firm but not angry. "We need to make sure this never happens again," she said. "We are responsible for creating an environment where respect, professionalism, and safety are priorities. Every employee, every customer, every visitor must be treated with dignity. That is non-negotiable." The managers nodded, some nervously, realizing that the culture they had taken for granted was being redefined. The woman outlined a series of immediate steps. First, there would be a company-wide review of policies and procedures regarding employee conduct. Every store would undergo sensitivity and anti-discrimination training, ensuring that staff understood how to handle conflicts professionally. Second, she would personally meet with employees affected by the incident to hear their experiences and provide reassurance. Third, she planned to use this moment as an opportunity to reinforce the values of the company through clear, consistent communication. Employees began to see the effects almost immediately. The staff meetings were open and honest, allowing employees to express concerns, share experiences, and ask questions. They spoke about moments when they had felt unsupported or unsafe, and the woman listened attentively, taking notes and asking clarifying questions. She wanted to understand the situation fully so that meaningful changes could be implemented. Her calm, attentive presence gave employees the courage to speak openly, knowing that their voices were valued. Meanwhile, the suspended manager was required to attend formal training and reflection sessions. These were not punitive for punishment's sake, but educational, designed to help him understand the impact of his actions and learn the principles of leadership, respect, and professionalism. He had never experienced accountability in this way before, and it forced him to confront the consequences of arrogance and impulsivity. Over time, he began to realize that true authority was not about control or aggression, but about setting an example, fostering trust, and creating a positive environment. The story of the incident started circulating online. Customers who had witnessed it shared their accounts, and people expressed shock, anger, and admiration for the woman's handling of the situation. While some news reports sensationalized the events, the woman remained focused on what truly mattered: improving her company, supporting her employees, and ensuring that respect was maintained at every level. She did not chase headlines or public attention. Her goal was long-term, meaningful change. As the week went on, the ripple effects became more visible. Employees treated each other and customers with greater care and consideration. Staff meetings began to include discussions about empathy, customer service, and conflict resolution. Managers were more aware of their behavior and its impact, modeling professionalism and calm decision-making. Even customers began noticing a change in the atmosphere of the store. The environment felt safer, more welcoming, and more attentive. The company's values were no longer abstract statements. They were actions lived daily by every employee. The woman also took time to personally thank employees who had handled the situation with composure and professionalism. She acknowledged those who had stood by during the incident, supporting their colleagues and remaining calm despite the chaos. She made it clear that their efforts were recognized and valued. This gesture strengthened loyalty and morale across the team. Employees felt seen, appreciated, and motivated to continue upholding the standards she had set. In addition to internal changes, the woman worked on long-term strategies to prevent similar incidents in the future. She implemented a more robust reporting system for conflicts, ensuring that any concerns could be addressed quickly and effectively. She revised employee handbooks and guidelines to make expectations clear, emphasizing respect, professionalism, and accountability. Training programs were updated with real scenarios, role-playing exercises, and discussions on handling difficult situations with composure and empathy. The manager, during his training, had moments of reflection that left a deep impression on him. He realized how much he had relied on fear and authority instead of guidance and respect. For the first time, he understood that leadership was about supporting others, listening carefully, and making ethical choices even when it was difficult. While he regretted the incident deeply, he also recognized it as a turning point in his personal and professional development. As the weeks passed, the story of the incident became a case study within the company. New employees were trained using the example to learn about professionalism, respect, and the consequences of inappropriate behavior. The woman used it as a teaching moment, showing that mistakes could be corrected, lessons could be learned, and culture could be strengthened when leaders acted decisively and fairly. Customers continued to notice the difference. Many commented on the positive change in staff interactions, the sense of attentiveness, and the overall environment of the store. Social media continued to share the story, not just of the confrontation, but of how it had been resolved responsibly. People admired the woman's composure, patience, and commitment to accountability. The incident, which could have been a source of shame or scandal, became a story of leadership, fairness, and human integrity. The employees began to feel a stronger sense of ownership and responsibility. They understood that their actions had consequences, that respect and professionalism were vital, and that the company was serious about maintaining a safe, positive, and ethical environment. Training sessions, team meetings, and one-on-one conversations reinforced these lessons, and the culture of the store began to evolve. The incident had been a wake-up call, but it had also become a catalyst for meaningful growth. Even the suspended manager, after completing his training and reflection sessions, was reintegrated carefully into the company. He had learned the importance of humility, empathy, and accountability. While he remained responsible for his past actions, he also began to contribute positively, now guided by the lessons he had learned from his mistake. Employees and managers alike observed the change, seeing that genuine growth and redemption were possible when someone accepted responsibility and worked to improve. The woman continued to visit the store regularly, observing operations, talking to employees, and ensuring that the changes implemented were effective. She remained calm, approachable, and attentive, embodying the very values she expected from her team. Employees respected her not just for her wealth or position, but for her fairness, clarity, and leadership in action. They understood that true leadership was about setting a standard, holding people accountable, and creating an environment where respect and professionalism thrived. By the end of the month, the store had fully recovered from the incident. The atmosphere was positive, the staff motivated, and the customers satisfied. The company had not only addressed a serious problem, but had also transformed it into a moment of learning and improvement. Employees felt empowered, managers felt accountable, and customers noticed the genuine change in the store's culture. The woman reflected on the entire experience with a sense of quiet pride. She had faced a challenging situation, acted decisively, and ensured that justice and accountability were upheld. She had turned a moment of potential conflict into a lesson that strengthened the company, supported her employees, and reinforced the principles she had built her business upon. She also understood that this was just one of many challenges she would face as a leader. But she knew that handling it with composure, fairness, and integrity had set the tone for how future incidents would be managed. Leadership, she realized, was not about avoiding conflict. It was about confronting it thoughtfully, ensuring accountability, and turning challenges into opportunities for growth and improvement. The story of the store, the incident, and the lessons learned would remain with employees and management for years to come. It became a symbol of the company's commitment to respect, professionalism, and ethical leadership. And for the woman, it was a reminder that even in the most challenging moments, clarity, composure, and integrity were powerful tools that could transform a negative situation into a lasting positive impact. By the time the evening lights of the city reflected off the store windows, the incident had fully become part of the company's story, not as a tale of anger or humiliation, but as a story of accountability, growth, and leadership. Employees walked taller, managers acted with more thoughtfulness, and the store continued to thrive as a place where respect and professionalism were more than words. They were actions. Weeks passed since the incident at the store, but its effects were still visible in every corner. The store had become calmer, more focused, and more professional. Employees moved with confidence, knowing that their work mattered and that they were supported. Customers noticed the change too. The smiles were genuine, the assistance thoughtful, and the overall environment welcoming. What had once been a tense and uncertain place had transformed into a store where respect, professionalism, and care were the priority. The manager, who had been suspended after the incident, had completed his training and reflection sessions. He had spent hours thinking about the impact of his actions, realizing how his impulsiveness and arrogance had caused harm. The sessions had forced him to confront not only the incident itself, but also the ways he had treated others in the past. Slowly, he began to understand that leadership was not about control or fear, but about guiding, supporting, and respecting those around him. When he returned to the store, the change in his approach was noticeable. He greeted employees politely, listened more than he spoke, and took care to handle difficult situations with patience and composure. He didn't try to prove anything or assert authority aggressively. Instead, he focused on doing his job well and setting a better example. Employees noticed the difference and responded positively, feeling safer and more respected in their workplace. The woman continued to visit her stores regularly, quietly observing operations and engaging with staff. She didn't make grand announcements or seek attention, but her presence alone reminded everyone of the standards she expected. Employees respected her not because of her wealth or status, but because of the fairness, clarity, and integrity she consistently demonstrated. Her leadership style was subtle but powerful, teaching lessons through action rather than words alone. One afternoon, she held a company-wide meeting with all store managers and senior staff. She addressed the incident directly, emphasizing the importance of accountability and integrity. "We cannot control every situation," she said, "but we can control how we respond. Respect, professionalism, and fairness are the foundation of everything we do. When we uphold these values, We create an environment where everyone, customers and employees alike, can feel safe and valued. The managers listened attentively. Some reflected silently on past mistakes while others took notes, eager to apply her guidance. She didn't speak to shame anyone. Instead, she shared her vision for a stronger, more unified company. She encouraged managers to foster open communication, listen to employees, and act decisively when challenges arose. Her words were not just instructions. They were lessons drawn from experience, delivered with calm authority and genuine care. Employees began to feel a renewed sense of purpose. They understood that their actions mattered, and that the company was committed to creating a positive and respectful environment. Staff meetings became spaces for discussion, training, and problem-solving rather than just routine updates. Employees felt empowered to speak up, suggest improvements, and contribute to the overall culture of the company. The store had become more than just a place of business. It was a community where people felt valued and respected. The customers, too, noticed the change. Many returned, commenting on the improved service and friendly atmosphere. Some who had witnessed the original incident expressed relief, seeing that the company had handled the situation responsibly. Others simply felt a sense of trust and comfort, knowing that the store valued respect and integrity. Word of mouth spread, bringing new customers who were drawn not only by the products, but also by the positive environment and the company's reputation for fairness. Even the manager's personal growth became an example for others. Employees observed how he handled challenges differently, how he listened before reacting, and how he treated others with patience and respect. His transformation served as a reminder that mistakes could be corrected, and that learning from them could lead to meaningful improvement. It also showed that accountability was not about punishment alone, but about growth and responsibility. As the months went on, the woman reflected on the incident and the changes it had inspired. She realized that moments of conflict, while uncomfortable, could lead to progress when handled correctly. The incident had tested her patience, judgment, and leadership, but it had also created an opportunity to strengthen her company's culture and values. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that she had turned a challenging situation into a lasting positive impact. One day, she walked through the store floor, observing employees as they interacted with customers. She saw a young cashier patiently helping an elderly customer understand a product, a stock clerk carefully arranging shelves while smiling at colleagues, and a manager calmly resolving a minor issue without raising his voice. She felt a sense of pride not for herself, but for the people who had grown through this experience, who had embraced accountability and professionalism. The woman also took the time to personally speak with employees who had been directly involved in the incident. She thanked them for their composure, acknowledged their efforts to maintain professionalism, and reassured them that the company valued their well-being. Her words were simple but heartfelt, and they left a lasting impression. Employees felt recognized, supported, and motivated to continue contributing positively to the store environment. At the same time, she continued to strengthen company policies to prevent future incidents. Reporting systems were made more accessible, training programs were updated, and clear guidelines were communicated to all staff. She emphasized that respect and professionalism were not optional, they were essential. The company's culture became one where employees understood that their behavior mattered, and where positive actions were recognized and reinforced. The incident and its aftermath also became a teaching tool within the company. New employees were trained using real scenarios from the store, including the confrontation and the resolution. They learned how to handle difficult situations, how to communicate effectively, and how to maintain professionalism even under pressure. The story became a symbol of accountability and growth, showing that challenges could be transformed into lessons that strengthened both individuals and the organization. Customers continued to respond positively to the changes. Many expressed admiration for the company's approach, noting the attentiveness and professionalism of the staff. Some shared their experiences on social media, highlighting the company's commitment to fairness and respect. While the incident had initially been shocking, the resolution and the visible improvements left a lasting impression, reinforcing the company's reputation for integrity and ethical leadership. The manager, too, continued to evolve. He sought feedback, attended additional training sessions, and made an effort to mentor younger employees. While he could not undo the mistake of the past, he could demonstrate through his actions that growth and accountability were possible. His journey became a subtle but powerful example for others, showing that even serious mistakes could lead to positive change when met with reflection, humility, and effort. As the year went on, the store thrived. Sales increased, employee satisfaction improved, and customer loyalty strengthened. The incident that had once threatened the company's image became a turning point, leading to a stronger, more resilient, and more compassionate organization. The culture of respect, accountability, and professionalism became ingrained, not just a set of rules, but a way of life for everyone involved. The woman, quietly observing all of this, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had handled a challenging situation with calm, clarity, and integrity, turning a moment of conflict into a lesson that impacted her company, her employees, and her customers. She had demonstrated that true leadership was about more than authority. It was about responsibility, fairness, and the ability to inspire others through action. Looking back, she realized that the incident had revealed both weaknesses and strengths within her organization. It had tested the people involved, challenged the company's values, and created an opportunity for growth. She had faced the situation with patience and determination, ensuring that every decision was guided by fairness and integrity. The results had been transformative, leaving a lasting positive impact on everyone connected to the store. By the end of the year, the story of the incident had become part of the company's legacy. It was told not as a tale of conflict or humiliation, but as a story of accountability, growth, and leadership. Employees shared it with new hires, managers reflected on it during training sessions, and customers who learned about it understood the company's commitment to respect and professionalism. The woman continued to lead quietly, confidently, and fairly. She visited her stores regularly, engaged with employees, and ensured that the culture she had built remained strong. She did not seek recognition for her actions. Her satisfaction came from knowing that the company was thriving, that employees were respected, and that customers experienced a safe, welcoming environment. In the end, the incident that had once seemed like a disaster became a defining moment, a story of accountability, reflection, and positive change. It reminded everyone involved that mistakes could be corrected, that respect was essential, and that true leadership was about guiding others with fairness, patience, and integrity. The store continued to grow and succeed, strengthened by the lessons learned and the values reinforced through that pivotal experience. The woman knew that challenges would arise in the future, as they always did. But she also knew that she and her company had proven that even in the face of adversity, it was possible to act with composure, make thoughtful decisions, and turn difficult moments into opportunities for lasting improvement, and that more than anything was the true measure of leadership and success.